Hello everyone, this is Gary on GNB here, and welcome to another installment of... And welcome to A Tale of Two Smiles, featuring Smiles 1 and 2. The Smile films have both got to be some of the most surprising horror films to come out in recent years for me, mainly because of how they do so much with a relatively simple premise. But I'll go further into that as we go along, starting off with 2022's Smile. Smile released in 2022 and is directed and written by Parker Finn. The film centers around Rose Cotter, a therapist who witnesses one of her patients gruesomely take their own life right in front of her, and now she's become the target of a smiling entity that is slowly killing her. I, like most other people, wasn't really too interested or impressed in Smile just based off of the trailer. I didn't think it would be dog shit or anything, but I did think it was just going to be another run-of-the-mill horror flick. Remnants of that really bad Truth or Dare movie, no, the other one, were still in the back of my mind because of the whole Smile gimmick and whatnot. But I heard people were surprised by the film, and while it took me a while, I did eventually check it out for myself, and I can gladly say this was a really good one. The story for this one really took me by surprise. It's so easy to make a movie centered around this premise and have it be super boring and generic. But no, the story and plot was very multifaceted, with a constant theme centered around mental health and trauma, the different ways it can affect and change your life, and how this smile creature reflects that in the narrative was done brilliantly. The thing that does hold this movie back a bit in terms of its story is kind of the formulaic aspect of it all, but even then, it's not too much of a negative for me. The main structure of the plot revolves around our lead being plagued by this entity, and slowly having to uncover the history behind it, who else it was attached to, and how, if there's even, a way to ward off the entity. Me describing it the way I did probably just gave a couple of folks some flashbacks to a bunch of other horror flicks, and I again want to preface this isn't a bad thing for me, purely because of how it's executed within the story. Yeah, all of these beats are relatively familiar, but watching how this movie tackles it, even if a bit formulaic, it does a great job at keeping the viewer's attention throughout the runtime, without it ever feeling too stale. The tone for this movie I think was perfectly handled. It takes itself seriously for the most part. It's hard for me to describe, but it has such a constant feeling of keeping you on edge. The movie will make some of the most mundane shots feel so goddamn foreboding for no reason, and I love it. And so much of that can be attributed to the directing and cinematography and stuff, which I'll go over shortly. But even then, the movie does know how to sprinkle in bits of comedy here and there. Not to a point where it feels mixed in with a lot of the horror shenanigans and whatnot, but little bits of levity are put in every once in a while, and I'll say it was handled pretty effectively. Because when it does happen, it's done in a tasteful way that breaks up the wall-to-wall tension the movie has. The directing and cinematography in this movie was also really damn good. I bring up something similar in my Evil Dead video. I don't know if that'll be out before or after this one, but I love whenever a director or cinematographer isn't afraid to have fun with the camera. Toy around with a variety of different shot compositions, cool camera angles and stuff just for the fun of it. Parker Finn and Charlie Seraph, I hope to God I pronounced that right, did their freaking thing with this one, because I loved the visuals in this. The characters in this movie I found to be really well handled. The movie doesn't have a wide variety of characters that I can really dive into, as it primarily focuses on Rose and her story. That doesn't mean there weren't ones I found pretty enjoyable, however. I thought Joel, her cop friend, was pretty cool. It's nice to see a cop be actually helpful in another one of these movies. It was really saddening watching the end to see that he'd become the next victim. And then the next film, we'll get to that in a bit, but I think it was a pretty solid character in this one, being how helpful he was to Rose's character. Rose's dickhead fiancé I didn't think was that bad either. Her boss I really enjoyed as well, had her best interests at heart throughout the film, and was just solid. Yeah, you get it, the side characters were for the most part pretty enjoyable. As for Rose herself, I thought she was a great protagonist. Her journey throughout the film, having to deal with this entity, while also slowly being forced to relive her past trauma, was incredibly well done. I love the way both of these things, being the smile entity and the trauma of leaving her mom to die, even if the mama trauma was focused on a bit less by comparison, it became so smoothly intertwined in the end. Rose over the course of the movie becomes so isolated as she continuously loses connections with the people around her. She decides to face it and her trauma head on and go to the place where all her trauma began. And we get an incredible scene of Rose facing the entity who's taken on the form of her mom and just letting it spill how much she's let it affect her life so much. It's great and a really good cultivation of her story, but then she fucking dies. This is something I kind of go back and forth on whether I like it or not, because with the rules they set out for this creature, which I'll get into shortly, it feels like facing your trauma head on would be a bit too easy of a way to defeat this thing. This is still a horror movie at the end of the day, so I don't necessarily mind it not having a squeaky clean ending, so to speak. But at the same time, it does kind of fly in the face of the theme we had going on throughout the film. Like, this theme feeds off of trauma, and there's this theme of not letting your trauma define you or your life and whatnot. So the protagonist tries to face the entity and her trauma directly. But no, that's not how you beat it. Fuck you.
I don't mind the ending we got, but at the same time, I can't help but feel it does muddy up the story a tad. The entity for this movie, I think, was handled so goddamn well. I love how for both of these films, there's never a direct answer to what it is or how to properly stop it. So it just makes the thing that much more terrifying. And that's not even talking about what it actually looks like. I love the little rules applied to this thing. If a horror flick can effectively establish consistent rules to the monster, it just makes it all the more fun for me. I don't always think it's necessary, but it is an appreciated touch. The same goes for the next film, like where you basically have to traumatize someone else in order to pass the entity on, preferably by brutally killing somebody. That shit, while unoriginal, is delightfully fucked up and I love it. And it's cool that it also has a time window before it usually kills its victim, being about 7 days. Again, while unoriginal, it's just nice, simple little additions that make it fun. I also love how the thing fucks with Rose's head, which just instills more paranoia to the whole story. I love how they utilize not knowing what's real or not. It added so much to the movie's ambiance for me. The cast for this movie was absolutely phenomenal. I'll say both of these movies are sold by the performances. I don't think these would be anywhere near as enjoyable if it weren't for all the incredible performances. From all the folks that got to do the smile shit, Rose's patient in the beginning, played by Caitlin Stasey, did an incredible job portraying that panicky side. Sosie Bacon was incredible as Rose. She does a great job at making Rose's descent feel real and natural. She also gets a healthy amount of monologues in the movie, and I think they were done greatly. I think it's important that she commands the movie as much as she does, because most of it is hinging on her, and I think she did a great job. Everyone else was pretty good too. This movie is stacked with a bunch of well-known actors. Kyle Gallner, I think, was pretty good as Joel. I really enjoyed Cal Penn as Rose's boss. Jesse T. Usher was also pretty good as Rose's fiancé, Trevor.
Also, his presence in the movie creates a pretty funny coincidence between both films that I'll go more in detail with when discussing the second movie.
Gillian Sinzer and Nick, last name I'm not even going to try to pronounce, were also enjoyable as Holly and Greg. Just a pretty solid cast all around in my opinion. The horror and scares in the movie was also expertly handled. I already mentioned how much they like to make mundane things so intense, but when we get to the creepy shit like the smiling folks, it is genuinely disturbing and unnerving. This movie also does have a buttload of jump scares, and the funny thing is, I more often than not think some movies' usage of jump scares feel really boring. It's very easy for a movie to make the usage of jump scares feel super cheap and lazy. So I love whenever movies like this roll around that do jump scares in a bit of a better way, in my opinion. The movie as a whole excels at tension and build-up for so many of its scares. Whether subtle like playing with lighting or shadows and whatnot, it consistently puts the viewer on the edge of their seat, so when those moments happen, it is pretty effective. That's not to say there aren't any of those easy and ineffective jump scares in the movie, because some of the time it isn't always well executed, but the movie and the other horror elements they put in here are pulled off so well that having the little jump scares implemented I think do nothing but complement the rest, if that makes any sense. But the practical effects and gore were oh so fucking good in this movie, dude. All the kills in this movie, while relatively simple for the most part, are accented by outstanding practical effects. The movie does use CG here and there, and for the most part, it is effectively used. There's like one scene where I think it looks a little rough, but the effects and gore were just incredible, especially for the smile creature. I might have to clear up the screen to show this off, because holy shit, this thing looks so disgustingly incredible. The constant rows of smiles and that creepy-ass stature will forever haunt me, dude. This thing looks incredible. Overall, 2022 Smile was pretty damn good. Like I said, it does a lot with a relatively simple premise. It has an incredible story centered around trauma that was executed relatively well, barring the ending, of course. It has fantastic performances, a really well-written cast of characters. The scares in this movie were handled greatly, having a great handle on suspense and build-up while having typical jump scares thrown in there. That does a serviceable job at getting the viewer, along with how the rest of the movie handles the horror stuff. The movie isn't perfect as it does dip its toes into the pools of other related horror movie type tropes, but as a whole, it was still a freaking blast.
And that carries us on over to Smile 2.
Smile 2 released in October 2024 and was directed and written again by Parker Finn. The film centers around Sky Riley, a pop star who was also a recovering drug addict who, once seeing a friend brutally kill themselves, is now plagued with the Smile entity, and we follow her as she slowly unravels throughout the film. This movie was also a genuine surprise for me. While I enjoyed the first film, when it was announced a sequel was being worked on, I didn't think too much of it. Mainly because I didn't think there was that much more you could do with this franchise. But color me impressed, because this movie is just as great as the first in my opinion. Dare I say even a bit better. The story for this one immediately jumps in terms of scale. Focusing on a therapist dealing with this entity was very interesting, especially with how well Rose's story was written. But I do like how big of a leap we took with centering around a pop star dealing with this thing. It invites a plethora of different scenarios where our lead can be challenged in ways different from our previous one. Instead of mental health and trauma taking the focal point of the movie's thematic pull, it's still in the movie but not focused upon nearly as much as some of the other stuff they do. Like the downsides that comes with fame, having all these constant eyes on you and the pressure it can bring and stuff like that. I think it was pretty well executed how it was told throughout the story. Something I was concerned about going into this movie is how or if they would retread the formula that was already pretty formulaic in the first movie. The protagonist is plagued with the entity, sees a bunch of creepy shit, has to figure out how or if the entity can even be stopped, but I'm glad they managed to work around it pretty well. The movie doesn't take too much time trying to retread all of that stuff. Anybody watching this more often than not has already seen the first one, so the way it goes about it I think was done relatively well, especially considering that when I watched this movie I didn't fully remember a lot of details from that first one, so I think the way it was done also works well for anybody who hadn't seen the first film. The writing for this film, like the first, was spectacular. I'll say the movie leaning a bit away from trauma being the central theme did take a while to grab me. I think because the first film put so much emphasis on it that it kind of became synonymous in my head whenever it comes to this monster and the franchise itself. But over the course of the movie, seeing what it was really going for, being all the stuff having to do with fame and whatnot, it started to win me over. I think this movie's theme lends itself to a dark ending a bit more than the first film did. Like I said, I didn't mind the ending to the first film, but it felt like it flew in the face of the theme the movie was focusing on. This movie didn't really have that problem for me. Something about this movie's writing is that they inject just a bit more humor into it. If the first movie's usage of humor was gently sprinkled throughout, this one feels like just a couple pats more. And I love how natural it feels. It never feels like the comedic moments step on the toes of any of the horror stuff. And like the first movie, it just does a good job at breaking up the tension. Something else I was blown away by when it came to this movie was the directing. I remember walking out of the theater with a friend of mine, and as we were talking, I wanted to look up and see who directed this movie. And when I saw it was Finn, I was literally gobsmacked. What the hell? And when I saw it was Finn, I was literally gobsmacked. The step up in quality when it comes to the directing cannot be understated. The visuals, the colors, the lighting, everything I loved about the directing of the first movie was elevated and then some. To the friggin' point where I literally thought this was another director before I looked it up. And it especially amazes me when this is only the second movie he's ever directed, after the first movie being his directorial debut. Which is even more shocking in of itself. I don't know what type of god hand this motherfucker has on his shoulder, but it's allowing him to do some pretty cool looking shit. The characters in this movie I honestly found to be better than the ones in the first film, and I enjoyed most of them from that movie. I honestly don't know what it is. Maybe it's the slight comedic touch-up that makes the characters a bit more enjoyable for me. I thought the fake Gemma was pretty fun throughout the movie. I adored Sky's assistant Joshua. He was a delight throughout the movie, and his little comedic bits often got a laugh out of me. Sky's mom is a character you just love to hate. Her relationship with Sky and how complicated it was one of the highlights for me over the course of the story. Seeing how distant she is with her and how attentive she is for Sky's career and rep, instead of her well-being, was very interesting to see rear its ugly head at several points in the story. It sucks what happened to Joel happened. I really hoped he would have played a bigger role. They at least gave him a really cool one-take sequence, and a bloody disgusting death on top of that. Even Lewis I thought was pretty entertaining for his small amount of screen time. I don't know, these guys just ring a lot more in my mind compared to the ones in the first. Everything I had to say about the Smile creature when discussing the first film still holds true for the second. I love how they got just a bit more ambitious with the trippy twists and turns they put in throughout the story. The first film had some pretty solid ones, but I love how this movie puts you through just as much of a mindfuck as Sky herself. Sky Riley was an absolutely phenomenal protagonist. I loved Rose in the first film, but Sky's story in this one had me hooked from beginning to end. Seeing Rose's descent was really interesting, but literally watching almost every facet of Riley's life literally crumble and wither away just hit different to me for some reason. I love how they incorporate different traits of our leads, that just adds to the intensity of the story. Like Rose's mom's mental illness being held over her head throughout the movie, on whether or not it's something she inherited from her due to all the crazy shit that's going on. Or in this film, Sky's history with drugs and alcohol being held over her head because of all the crazy shit that's going on. I think because this story is far bigger in scale than the first, it makes a lot of the scenes where Riley's freaking out or just going off the rails feel that much more intense. Like I said earlier, even if focused upon slightly less, the movie does still center around trauma. The trauma Riley has being her causing a car crash that killed her boyfriend. I honestly think this element gets overshrouded due to everything else the story is tackling. Compared to the first film, this character's specific trauma being the focal point. In here, because the theme is focused on other stuff, it makes the character-specific trauma thing feel like a bit of an afterthought, which I think was a little disappointing. I honestly wish this was incorporated into the story a bit more smoothly. But just seeing all the shit she's forced to go through, and how much she and her life is starting to unravel because of this entity, really makes you want to see her survive and get out in some way, even when it feels like there's almost no point. They continue on giving a sliver of hope just to take it away. I thoroughly enjoyed Riley's character, and most of it is due to the exceptional performance by Naomi Scott. She completely bodies this role. She is giving it her all, and it paid off greatly. Seriously, easily the standout performer of the film. The movie, like the first, also has a pretty star-studded cast. Freaking Drew Barrymore makes a cameo. I'm glad Ray Nicholson was utilized as greatly as he was, partly for that creepy-ass smile and the scene he shares with Naomi Scott in the car. That scene alone is a major highlight for me, and the two did a great job in the scene. Lucas Gaga as Lewis, Dylan Jalula as Gemma, Kyle Gallner as Joel, Peter Jacobson as Morris, Rosemary DeWitt as Sky's mom, all just really good castings.
And the latter who I think coincidentally has something in common with Usher from movie 1. And it's that arguably two of the characters that have some of, if not the biggest impact on our main lead's mental health, is a cast member from The Boys. Rose gets into marital issues with A-Train, and Huey's mom is an even shittier one to Sky than she ever was to him. And for a clarification, I called him a dickhead earlier as a slight exaggeration, because while it makes sense for Trevor to be acting the way he was in that movie, not believing Rose, thinking that she's a freaking lunatic, and bringing in the therapist to do an intervention and all that, it's just the way Usher plays him makes him come across as more of an asshole than I think they initially intended him to be. I don't know if that was a directional thing or something Usher himself was just going for some reason. He did a good job regardless, I just thought it was pretty funny.
I again love all the folks that got to do the smile shit, especially during some of the cool stunts we get in the movie. The cast all around was amazing. The scares and actual horror were also really well handled. It carries over the same energy the first film had for the horror stuff, but with a bit of an uptick in quality. The way it handles suspense and tension is still really well done, as well as the jump scares still being very effective. They just have a really good handle on build-up and timing for a lot of this stuff, and it's so damn effective. Something else I love about these movies is their usage of sound design. So many scenes, big or small, between both films have so much character added to them because of good sound design. Like the scene of Rose listening to her patient's tape, slowly rewinding it, and it keeps you so focused on the sound you won't know it's set up for a jump scare. That or even little stuff like the sound of Sky ripping her hair out throughout the movie. Where things just get more and more intense and stressful, the sound matches that vibe. Just nice little additions that are really cool. The gore in this movie was incredible. Compared to the first movie, this one ups the ante quite a bit. I love just how fucking nasty this movie gets. Lewis smashing that weight on his face, seeing that piece of flesh just peeling off, Sky's mom stabbing her in the face. The practical effects were just really damn good in this movie. Even the VFX they used looked great. That one shot, and I'm not even gonna say it by name, editing Darion already knows the freaking shot I'm talking about. This shit, call me a pussy all you want, scared the hell out of me. The way these movies also utilize music, I really enjoy. The score for both are amazingly eerie and haunting. I want to highlight Smile 2 for having some fantastic original songs, sung by Naomi Scott herself, and I listen to them almost regularly. The ending as well, I think, was great. When I watched the trailer, I knew there was only one way they could go to end the movie, and I think this movie is a decent example of something being a bit predictable, but still being well executed to the point it's still very effective. The movie ending with the entity killing Sky in front of millions of people, effectively giving itself a wide network of people to jump to and from. I absolutely cannot wait to see how they tackle this in the next film. Overall, Smile 2 was a friggin' amazing movie. An incredible story, phenomenal performances, excellent blood and gore, a fantastic handle on scares. This movie really was a surprising step up from an already pretty great horror film. And I can't wait to see where the series goes next. I'll say, something I think both these movies have problems with is probably a lot of loose ends. Between both movies, it feels like certain plot elements or characters kind of get forgotten by the end, and it feels a little unsatisfactory. So I kind of hope they bring certain elements back at some point.
And before we end things off, I want to quickly introduce a new little segment I like to call Why You Should Never Take Your Job Too Seriously. Here we have Rose Cotter, who had basically spent her entire shift the previous night at the hospital. She was there for far longer than I think she even needed to be, I think. And the most tragic part about it is she could have avoided all the shit that she went through in the past week had she just taken her ass home. She was literally on her way out the door, but then she just came on crawling back. She was tortured and then viciously killed by a supernatural, demonic, smiling entity, all for the price of being a diligent therapist. So, with all that said, if you agree or disagree with anything I've said in this video, let me know right down there in the comments below. Also, be sure to like and subscribe. This has been Darion GNB, and take care.